In this video, we're going to be checking out a budget, bare bones mechanical keyboard kit, the CIY Tester 68 that Mozano recently sent to me. We're going to start with a little bit of an unboxing. Then I'm going to throw some Gateron ink blacks, which are already lubed. Throw on some of those, as well as these beautiful Mozano and Domikey Die For Me keycaps. By the way, I want to point out that this video is not sponsored by Mozano, but they did send me this stuff for free. So thank you very much. And by the way, these keycaps, I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you, they're quality. Anyways, we're gonna see what it sounds like, stock, like right out of the box. But then, my friends, boom. We're gonna spray paint the case. We're gonna do some tape mods. We're gonna do some foam mods. I finally bought an X-Acto knife so I don't look like such an idiot on YouTube. And then we will see what this bare bones $40 keyboard looks and sounds like fully modded out. So before I show off my fancy X-Acto knife, let's do a little bit of an unboxing, shall we? This thing costs like 40 or 50 bucks. I think 50, but Mozano, the kind people, actually gave me a special link for you guys. In the description below, you get like 15, 20% off, which brings it down to like 40 bucks. Pretty sweet. So they gave me the translucent green case. It's not my favorite, but I didn't choose it. It is nice though. Probably lets the RGB shine through. Now, 68 key keyboard. It comes with hot swappable PCB. There's a nice case plate on there. And I did see online that there is a silicone, I have no idea how you say that, dampener between the PCB and the plate. I'll actually take that off and show it to you in a second. It says this is Bluetooth, and it has a dongle, which I assume, yep, there's the dongle right there. You can plug in. It comes with a keycap puller. It comes with a manual, and that's it. Oh, that's right. This one's battery powered. I forgot about this. So we're gonna stick some batteries in here so you don't have to charge it. I think that's actually pretty cool. I mean, there are pros and cons for charging versus battery, but I haven't seen one like this. It looks cool. So I think it looks like it takes some 2 AAA batteries. I'm gonna toss in there. We'll see what this sounds like actually right out of the box. By the way, cool stabs, bro. Like that peachy, like creamy color, panda color almost. Oh, that's cool. Salmon color, if you will. Okay, now I'm gonna shut up for a while. Let's toss in some ink blacks and put on the beautiful Domikey. Thank you again to Mozano for sending these to me. You're awesome. Well, let's go see what it sounds like out of the box, and then I'm gonna completely take it apart and possibly make it worse. We'll see. So, step number 0 for modding this keyboard would be removing all the keycaps and switches, of course, and then unscrewing the top plate from the PCB. I think there were 7 screws in total. There are also 3 or 4 screws holding the PCB into the bottom of the case, which I also had to remove. Next up, I went ahead and took off the stabilizers to lube them. They have 0 factory lube on them. They're clip-in, which means you just press the little tab at the top and they pop right out. After that's done, the top plate will pop right off, and credit where credit is due, the CIY Tester 68 is a very cheap kit, but these are pretty quality ingredients to a nice custom mechanical keyboard. It's very sturdy, it's very well done, there's no chipping or scratches on the paint, or everything looks really solid on the inside. That includes the silicone dampener as well, which you can see right here, pulling off the PCB. It's very high quality. And you don't really find this on cheap budget boards that often, so I'm really impressed that they include it. Next up, just popping off a few of these PCB screws so we can take it apart and mod it. Of course, you want to be careful not to rip it off too much because it is still connected via the cable, which you can simply just pull out of the PCB and then you're good to go. Now the Tester 68 does come with a tiny bit of case foam down in there. This is not really going to dampen that much sound. It's pretty cheap, but it can be used as a nice guide for when we do our own foam modding here in a second. Something that's much more dense. And as you can see, I'm taking these little feet off. They're pretty well glued on there, which is, I guess, a plus. But I want to spray paint this bad boy, so I figured I'd leave these off so I can keep them white, and I'll put them on after we spray paint. So everything's going great in this mechanical keyboard mod process so far, but this is where things start to take a turn for the worse. First of all, that sticker on the back is super duper hard to get off. I eventually scraped it off with my fingernails and then used a little bit of Gooby Gone. If you don't know what that is, Google it, to get the rest of the sticker residue off. And then had to wash it with warm water and soap just to get the Gooby Gone off. And then yada yada yada. Spray paint time. So never have I ever painted my own keyboards. First step is going to be getting a little bit of painter's tape to cover the cables, to stick where the little battery nodes are, both on the inside of the keyboard and on the bottom of the keyboard where the batteries connect, because I didn't want any paint messing around with how those batteries work. I have no idea how batteries work, but I figured it'd be bad. And it's okay to have a little bit of green, non-painted area on the inside of the keyboard where nobody's gonna see anyways. So after reading about 4 articles on Google, I'm now officially an expert at painting a custom mechanical keyboard. And the first step is to start off with a light sanding. I've seen some places recommend like 200, 300-ish grit sandpaper. I did that, and it left little scratches on this plastic, and I'll be honest, I don't think it actually made a bit of difference. The spots that I missed, the spray paint tended to apply just the same. I saw no difference, so I would actually probably skip this going forward. That said, after you spray paint, you'll have to do a few coats. I do recommend taking a very, very light grit. I'm talking like 800 to 1,000 grit sandpaper, just to remove any splotches of paint that found its way into the keyboard, to smooth it out a tiny bit. It's going to look terrible. You're going to scratch up the spray paint, but you're about to do another coat over it anyways, and the point is just to make it as smooth as possible. For paint, I grabbed a nylon spray paint. Paint plus primer. Actually, you do need to use a primer in some way, and a clear matte spray paint. It's kind of like a finish. It actually ended up being a little bit more sticky than I would have liked. I might have used like polyurethane if I do this again, but alas. So I'm actually going to be doing another separate video on spray painting mechanical keyboards, but for now I'll just say that I did 3 coats of pink with about 30 minutes of drying in between, just to make sure everything's set correctly, that I'd flip it over and do the bottom, and then I finished it with a clear coat where I actually messed up a little bit, but we'll talk about that later in another video. So while the paint was drying in between coats, I went back inside and I started with a foam mod. This would be cutting out some high density foam. You can use neoprene or sorta, or I actually just use drawer liner from Home Depot because it's very cheap and it's not gonna make that big of a difference in my experience. It's gonna be way better than that cheap light foam included. But as you can see, I did use the foam that they included in the bottom of the case as a guide to use my brand new fancy pants X-Acto knife, which actually worked really well, by the way, way better than my pocket knife, to outline this foam to put in the bottom of the case. Now, the purpose of this foam is to dampen the sound, makes it more muted, if you will. And I actually believe that this kind of cancels out a tape mod, which you're going to see in just a second. Tape is actually designed to reflect the sound waves back at you once you hit the keys, back upwards, I suppose you could say. But this case foam does make the keyboard heavier and more sturdy, in my opinion, and it does help to reduce a little bit of the plastic case resonant sound. If I had a better high-end case, I probably wouldn't put any foam down in there, but it is just a normal plastic keyboard case. I figured I would reduce some of that resonance there, and then we'll do a tape mod to make the sound more creamy overall. After the initial foam mod, I decided to do another foam mod, the PE, which stands for polyethylene, by the way, polyethylene foam mod. It's a very specific type of foam. This one actually came with the keyboard. This is what the keyboard was wrapped in the box, which I think is amazing. You put this underneath the plate, but above the PCB. so that switches kind of pop through this. You actually plug your switches into your hot swappable PCB through the PE foam, which, by the way, will actually make it a little bit of a mess in terms of bending your pins on the bottom of your switches. Neither here nor there. You'll see me talk about this later in the video. But the point is, this actually makes it a more creamy, poppy sound. It's a little bit like Rice Krispies, crackly baby, snap, crackle, pop. It adds that type of noise. I don't think it dampens the sound as much, but it just makes it a different sound. It's one you'll recognize, as you'll see from the sound test later in this video. So I actually got smart and grabbed an ink pen to draw out where the stabilizers will go on the PE foam, so I could go ahead and cut those out with my X-Acto knife. You don't want them under the stabilizers. Well, actually, you do. And I actually would have tried this again, cutting out less PE foam. You'll see later in the video, this actually makes the sound a little bit inconsistent with the keys that have stabilizers under them, and the keys that don't. I actually would have tried to cut out less PE foam, like the minimum amount necessary, but we'll talk about that later in the video, and you'll see how it sounds. Next up, my least favorite task, to be frank, lubing stabilizers. So, credit where credit is due, I actually think these stabilizers are pretty good for a budget keyboard build. They don't come factory lube, which I actually appreciate, but that does mean you have to do this yourself completely. You could probably get by with factory lube, it'll still be a little scratchy, but if you have the Krytox 205 and or Super Lube, which is what I am using here, of course it's better to just do your own. So these are clip-in stabilizers, super easy to take off the plate. You just twist them to remove them from the stabilizer bar. I actually recommend going and checking out Teja's stabilizer video. It's going to be far better than anything you can learn here in 30 seconds, but I will just leave this up on the screen so you could see my process of lubing. Basically just involves dabbing a little bit of Krytox 205 inside the stabilizer housing and on just the sides of the stabilizer stems, which, by the way, are pre-clipped, or not pre-clipped, but they don't need clipping. There's no part that's going to smack into the bottom of your PCB. I do have a separate YouTube video on lubing switches, most of which applies specifically for the Krytox 205 stuff. I'll leave it linked in the description below. After I do the Krytox 205, I will dip and dab the actual stabilizer bars into the Super Lube just to get a little bit on the upper part of the bar, the flat part of the bar, not the bends, if that makes any sense. Those right words here, I know I don't have them, but I think you could see what I'm talking about. Personally, I hate lubing and messing with stabilizers in general. I'm not very good at it. And I also do not do like the holy mod where I'm like ripping up band-aids and trying to stick them in the stabilizer. Like, I just don't do any of that because it takes too much time. For the return, just my opinion. Some people swear by it, and that's totally cool. Go watch other YouTubers for those tutorials. But all that said, I did do like a OG Band-Aid mod, quote unquote. I actually had some little bitty stabilizer padding stickies, if you will, from an old KBD7 build, and I decided I could actually use those again for this build. They're basically little padding stickers that you just peel off and you can stick where your stabilizers will hit the PCB, so I stuck them on there. Why not? And last but not least, the tape mod, the Tempest mod. Basically, taking some masking tape, or in my case, painter's tape. Do not use duct tape or gaffer's tape. Those are way too sticky. Use something that's not very sticky. Put it on the bottom of the PCB. Do make sure it actually sticks, by the way. You'll have to press down just a little bit. You don't want it coming loose and being crunchy or papery. That's not what you're after. You're after a nice poppy, creamy sound. It'll actually pop that sound back up after you press it, rather than letting all of the sound go through the PCB into your case foam. Do a few layers here. Most people recommend like 2 layers. I actually saw some YouTuber, I don't even know who it was, do some overlapping. So I'll overlap like 50% of my tape across the bottom of the PCB, then use the trimmers to trim off the edges, and that's it. Just make sure to leave a space for your wire to plug in to the PCB. All right, now my case is all pretty and pink and spray painted, and I've let it dry, even though I messed up 1 or 2 spots on the back trying to remove a bug they got stuck in the paint, and then I tried to, get the bug out, and it made it even worse, and I'm an idiot. But the point is, I could have done a lot better if I had taken my time. Doesn't matter. Now it's time to piece this entire build together. First up, inserting the foam that I cut out into the bottom of the PCB, poking through all of the little screw towers that you're going to place the screws into, plugging in the PCB, and setting it in. Next up, we're going to be putting in the clip-on stabilizers into the top plate and just testing that everything's nice and snug and tight, doesn't move around. The stems will come up and down. This is also where I would recommend actually putting in a switch and maybe even the keycap and then typing on it and trying to tune your stabilizer. If you don't know what I mean by that, go check out Teja's video. I'm lazy, I generally don't do that, and I'm okay with the way this turned out, so, well, why would I do that? Next up is actually gingerly placing the PE foam on top of the PCB and trimming it just to make sure the plate with the stabilizers are going to fit down there nice and snug and nothing's going to be, hanging out of the case, etc., etc. By the way, this is a little bit tricky, and I actually recommend popping in a few switches, maybe like 4, maybe like 1 in each corner, into the PE foam as you're trimming it up, just to keep it solid attached to the PCB so you can trim it easier. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And you know what else is going to make your life a lot easier? Actually pressing down the PCB into the case as far as it needs to go. There's a lot of padding down there. It can be easy to just set it in and think, oh, this is where the PCB goes. No. Press down harder and get it through the screw holes. So now that I pressed my PCB all the way in there, I put the PE foam in there, it's time to screw down the top plate into the case. Let's make it all snug, good to go. For this build, I'm actually going to be using the Gateron ink blacks, which I have a full review and sound test on. I'll leave a link to that video in the description below. I love these. I'm also going to supplement with the Kale Box Jelly blacks, because I didn't have enough Gateron ink blacks. I had to supplement the rest of the keyboard. Those numbers don't get used that much anyways, right? And the next step in this process is actually to plug the keyboard in and test your keys. I did not show this on camera, but I pulled up my key tester. I'll also leave a link to that in the description below. Made sure each key registered. They didn't, because I'm using PE foam and I bent a lot of pins, so I had to take them out, rebend the pins, plug them back in, and then we're good to go. So, all that done, here we go. Our build is now complete, and we are ready for a nice little sound test with the CIY Tester 68, fully modded. So let's actually wind down here with Pete's thoughts about the Tester 68. Before I do that, thank you so much to Mazzano for sending me the keyboard to test out. It's been really fun. And for the keycaps. These are beautiful, by the way. Black case, the pink obviously was a fun spray painting job, but a black or like a deep gray or even like, I don't know, maybe even like a green or blue. I think these keycaps would look absolutely amazing. Comes with a full kit, ANSI ISO. I think they're cherry profile, but they're just brilliant. Like they're just the highest possible quality keycaps you can get. And I think they look amazing. I actually really like the way they look with this pink. I didn't do a great job spray painting, but that's on me, right? It's not on the keyboard or the keycaps. It looks brilliant. So thank you to Mozano. Okay, Pete's thoughts. If you don't want to do any work, or you don't actually kind of enjoy tinkering or customizing your keyboards, you probably don't want to buy a bare bones kit like the Tester 68. Buy pre-built, you'll be good to go. Several choices on Amazon, or if you want to pay a little bit more for a super fancy one, you can. But if you enjoy doing a little bit of customization, this is a really, really, really good deal. For like 30 bucks, 30, 40 bucks, or whatever it is, it's ridiculously good. Case is well built. PCB's great. It comes with a plate and the silicone gasket, which I didn't put back in there, but I'd probably recommend it, especially if you like to dampen the sound of your keyboard. It's like $30, $40. Are you kidding me? That's a steal. That's an absolute steal. It's really well done. The stabilizers were nice, even though you do have to lube them yourself, which is actually kind of a good thing if you don't mind doing that. You don't want them to be factory lube to be bad. You'd rather them come like this, so you can do the lubing right there, and it sounds great. Plate, PCB, silicone dampener. It does have like the super cheap foam in the bottom already, so technically if you don't want to take it apart and do any mods, yeah, it's modded, custom, if you will, but not really. It's super cheap foam. But then again, you can go to $5 at Home Depot, do what I did, and that's better than nothing. And it's easy to take apart, it's easy to disassemble, easy to unplug. I like the batteries personally, never ever having to plug this in. It is nice to be able to plug it in to use it, but if you're gonna go wireless, I actually really like the batteries. I do. It's pretty cool. Last thing, word of warning, I've watched other YouTubers talk about this keyboard and these mods specifically. There's one important thing they left out. That little iffy period between like, oh, I think I have everything done, to the switches are in and working. There's a few steps in there. For one, if you do PE foam underneath the plate, you're gonna bend your switch pins. You just are. Like literally half of these were not working when I plugged it in. I had to take the switches out. By the way, do that before you put the keycaps on there. I had to take the switches out. I had to like bend back the little pin and then try and stick it in again. It took like 25, 30 minutes to redo. That's just part of it. Now, you could probably poke little holes in the PE foam beforehand with like a little knife or something, tweezers maybe. Maybe I should have done that. I don't know. I didn't. And the only other thing I feel like other YouTubers experienced that they didn't really show was the inconsistency with this type of mod, especially that PE foam right underneath the plate. This is inconsistent with some of these other sounds in here because it doesn't have the foam underneath at all. And same thing with like the shift key. Shift keys are always generally more muted in general from my experience, but this enter key right here is a beast. Boom, boom, boom. It's not pingy per se, but it's just a little inconsistent with the rest of the keyboard. It's not the keyboard's fault. It's probably my fault. And my suggestion would be if you're going to be doing these mods, pay very close attention to where that foam is and where it's not. And pay attention to where these screws are. Those little screws will stick up. And you might be surprised how much ping and like metallic sound they can add to like a cluster of keys somewhere near here. In fact, I can't remember what it was, but one of these in here was like super pingy, and I was like, I know it's the spring. I just know something's like popping off, and it's like kind of giving a little bit of vibrating there. So just pay attention. You have to be very precise if you want the best sound possible when you're doing these mods. Don't be sloppy like me. It's worth taking your time. Cut out the PE foam exactly where it needs to be. Try and get as close up in here to the stabilizers as possible. And hopefully your keyboard will be more consistent than mine. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed my little Tester 68 happy fun times here on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for watching. Do click the links that Mozano sent me if you want to go check out this keyboard or those keycaps. Big thank you to them for sending me this stuff. They would love it if I sent you them their way. Go click the links in the description below to learn more, and I'll see you next time. KeebNews family. See you next time. Adios.